forum. I didn't know about that. So that's the kind of stuff that we're continuing to do in various mechanisms, through forums, through emails, through messaging, video messaging, and then most importantly, those engagement sessions of all the stakeholders, creating advisor groups. We created an advisor group, our physician advisory group, our PAC. Everything has acronyms, we're in healthcare, right? So we've created a NAC, which is a Nursing Advisory Council. And so we're bringing these individuals together to look at these different components of the operation and trying to make sure that we capture some of those pain points, all of those issues and challenges, so we can make sure we don't replicate any of that. And we continue to build a future state that will drive efficiency, that will yield better outcomes, and that will allow us to provide exceptional care.
Right, thank you. Sarah, something that stuck out to me in your story is you kind of described it as, change as a value and being naive, but it's also being that thought leader and thinking ahead of the times. And so how have you managed to sustain that change over time in your organization?
I think one of the keys to the sustainment is looking at, I think about change as it's a hypothesis. When you're making changes, you have a hypothesis that that change is going to solve a problem. And you need to be open to being agile and adjusting. That's a key to success. But once you have something that is generally working, you've got success of evidence that you've achieved the change you set out to do, then I think a key is just setting up mechanisms to be able to hear. And I think that is one of our real challenges with large healthcare systems, healthcare in general, society in general, 2018. What mechanisms do you have to hear, to create dialogue, and to reinforce the message, and then also get information back that was to adjust? We're not perfect at this, but we are moving towards being a lean managed organization. And so there are places in the organization where we have daily engagement. It may not be daily, but we have engagement systems where if we're using engagement forums, we're hearing and being able to make provide support and make it targeted to go where we actually are. So I think mechanisms that enable us to hear like an engagement system are really key to that. Another key, I would say, is being really explicit about the behaviors that are necessary to sustain the change, particularly leadership behaviors that are necessary to sustain the change. And to me, more and more, curiosity is a really critical component of effective leadership at this time in life. Humility, self-discipline. So building these things in to what expectations we hold for ourselves, and then we create for our leaders. I think those you can design those intentionally to help reinforce the change you're trying to create and the sustainment that you are aiming for. So those are a few ideas.
Thank you. And I'm already inspired to make a change. So Brad, I've struck the word organizational change from this question. And in your experience, what are the 2 to 3 of the most effective drivers of agility?
No, you did do it. You did change. You're learning. So I think a couple of things, and these aren't. There's no, I think, no rocket science behind this. But I think when you're going through these different changes in an organization, and it could be from an IT project, which I think is one of the best examples of a disruption and change for an entire organization, to small departmental changes. I really think it comes down to just key things. One, I think is leadership. I mean, I think there has to be a face of the change. There has to be a spokesperson. There has to be a person that is kind of driving the ship. The great example that I like to give is, you got a speedboat, but if there's no rudder, you're just going all over the place. And it's that person that's keeping you on task. I think that, leadership, change causes chaos. And everyone's looking to, how is this change going to affect me? It's, that's what a lot of our staff, and, everybody that's going through it, how is it, make sure the situation is stable, And I think that's what has to be done first. I think next, and this is probably one of the hardest, is how do you communicate all these levels of change? In healthcare, sometimes this is where we fall, is how we communicate, because there's so many different ways to communicate. We have formal methods, we have informal methods, we have internal stakeholders, external stakeholders, and it's trying to figure out how to develop a structure around constant communication. Like it was said earlier, next thing you know, you go to a forum and somebody says, well, I didn't know. And you're like, how did you not know? It was in our weekly newsletter, it was blasted out in an email, and we had probably 3 or 4 conference calls, and nobody got it. And so I think that you have to find ways to communicate. At the same time, beat your rumor mill. I mean, I think that's also one of our biggest challenges, is if you're not constantly communicating this level of change, your rumor mill is so far out in front of you. And I find in my role a lot of times, I learn more about what's going on in the rumor mill. You have to be visible and present on the floors and in the departments, and you've got to ask questions. All right, who's saying what? And then you have to have stakeholder engagement. There's no one leader that's going to do this all to themselves. And you have to have people that are going to engage with you from the beginning to the end. And that goes to one of the first questions around physician leadership and staff leadership. It's really that collaboration and who's going to be that face with you, standing out there in front. So those are really the 3 things that I think that really help drive first.
Great. I'm going to throw this one out for a toss-up to see who wants to go first. But I'd like all our panelists to do this, because it goes back to that curiosity and humility aspect of that. And you've obviously been very successful in many change projects and throughout your career, but can you share a story of an effort that was less successful than you anticipated, and what went wrong, and what does this suggest about pitfalls that others should avoid? So, toss-up question.
I'm happy to go first.
All right.
Because my notes are right here on that. Right in the center. These are, I'm not speaking about any particular change, but this is a theme that we don't learn our own lessons. So sadly, these are themes of some of the bigger changes we've undertaken. One of them is an over-reliance on outside consultants. We do it all the time for probably really good reasons. We're busy, they're experts, and there's lots of problems created by doing that. And one of them is it's really convenient when things start not working the way we wanted them to blame the consultants. Because suddenly leadership's not accountable, even though they hired the consultants and they approved of the work the consultants put forward. So it's a tricky balance to know how front and center they are, when you need them in the background, when you excuse them, when you need to bring them back. But I think that's one pitfall. Another is looking at a change sort of as a microcosm, not seeing that there's so many tentacles. Like you referred to with your IT changes, those touch, very personal, they touch every aspect of how people do their work. So a failure to recognize that the holistic nature of the change and how many people are affected and how personal it is. That's another thing that we have tried to learn. And then failure to measure the results. What do you, because we don't want to over survey people, or because they're busy and we don't have quite the right metric and we'll just do it every year because we don't have something that, if we're not measuring, we're setting out with this hypothesis, we have a change we're trying to create and we hope it'll make a difference, but we have no way of measuring that difference, then we can call it a success and we don't know better, or a failure and we don't know better. So measuring what matters and making that not a punitive exercise, but a way to really gauge whether or not your hypothesis is working and what adjustments you need to make. And then I would say a lack of, things get hard with these changes, and there has to be a forum and I guess appropriate venues where you can just speak authentically as leaders or people affected by the change. You can say, I hate this. You can say, I'm hopeless. You can say, I don't think this is going to work. You can say, they hate me for this, or my best friend's losing their job, or whatever it is. So having forums for that authentic communication, so we don't have to burden our pets and our spouses, our kids. They get tired of these conversations. We have forms to do this at work that are safe and appropriate, but we have a commitment when we leave that room that we are unified, that we are inspiring. We can point out that things are challenging, but we are, we have our eye on the prize, and we're able to just lead. I mean, that's what these efforts need, that kind of leader. They need to be constantly, the inspiration has to be, leaders have to inspire. Like, don't stop inspiring, even though there are days when you're inspiring people when you yourself are thinking, I don't think this is, I'm really worried about it. So those are some of the things we're trying to learn.
I'll go next. I think Sarah is reading my notes. I'm sitting here going, well, I can check that one off. I think that's actually, this question I think is great, because this is actually, I think, what sessions like this are about. We can talk about some high-level things, but it's also learning where things didn't go well, and that's what I hope that this room hears, because whenever I was thinking about this, there were really 3 different things that I've had to deal with where you're like, oh, this is just not going well. And the first thing came in my mind, and I really don't mean to pick on any consultants in the room, since Sarah started it, I was going to add on. I think we overemphasize that role. I was involved in a project at a previous health system where we started this with the effort of, we're going to cut expenses. We're going to bring in a consultant firm, and they're going to cut $100 million. And the problem is we were blaming the consultant all the way through the process. And well, we're only at $60 million, and why isn't the consultant doing a better job?
Because you're paying them $40.
Yeah, well, and it was, but it was to your point. We were taking the leadership. We were letting them be the leaders. We knew the business. We knew where to go. We were not prioritizing the efforts and the work. We were not directing that consulting engagement to get us to the end point and using them as experts in other areas. We knew where we should have gone. We didn't do that, and I don't think we engaged them properly. I think we also, to one thing Sarah mentioned, it was in that project. It was all about saving $1 and not making a better process, or it was not improving the flow. It was everything had to be attached to the dollar, and sometimes that doesn't equal better patient care, better processes, all these other things. And so I think the whole project, I won't say it was a failure, but it was a disruption into the whole organization, which I don't think it had to be if it was started out properly. And I think looking back, and in my role now, I try to start out any of these consulting engagements with a better scope and a better understanding moving forward about what we're going to do. I have a couple of physician groups of engagement, because merging culture. I think we started out thinking, it was actually anesthesiologists. I was like, oh, they're anesthesiologists. They'll all get together. They'll be fine. Completely opposing cultures in their groups, and not understanding the backgrounds and the histories of those groups was a failure for us. And truly understanding how we're going to bring these people together and have them be one happy family at the end. And so that one actually did work out, but it started out pretty rocky. And lastly, probably one of my biggest change efforts in my career was whenever I was in Dallas working at Parkland. And we had an interesting situation there where, because we were not changing our processes and our flow fast enough, we got told to do it by CMS and the State Department of Health. And then it takes it out of your hands. And then you have all these surveyors and people with, that are coming outside your organization telling you how to do it. And in looking back on that, if we would have changed faster, did what we knew what to do, we probably would have alleviated 2 years of chaos. And so sometimes I think we didn't identify we needed to change fast enough, and then we didn't set goals and timelines to implement that level of change. So, honestly, there's numerous examples. I'm sure everyone in this room has those examples, but I think that's how we, as an industry, become better, is telling these stories and helping each other out, making sure that we don't have the same pitfalls over and over.
Yeah, not to repeat any of the the challenges that others have faced, and many of you, but I mean, it's inevitable. We're going to hit bumps on the road, and it happens very routinely. But a couple of key points, and Brad mentioned it earlier, and that's the fact that you need to have strong leadership. You need to have that face, that individual that's going to drive this. And then you equally need to make sure that you have consistency and that you have agreement and full support from that leadership. Not just the one person, but from the entire team. One person in that entire team can derail the entire process. And I've seen it happen firsthand. You know, we've had experiences where, as an organization, we were embarking on really transforming and leveraging lean as not just a methodology, but a philosophy of how we approached our work. It was unsuccessful.
Yeah.
And it was unsuccessful because there was no buy-in from some of the leaders. And I'm not talking about the managers and directors, I'm talking about the executive suite. If there's one member of the executive suite that's not on board, it's done. I don't care what it is. So we have to be very, very cautious about that. We have to be able to have those crucial conversations with one another. Talk to one another, make sure that there's consensus. Now, the reality is we'll agree many times, hopefully more than not. We'll disagree at times, and we'll agree to disagree at times. But that's okay, as long as when we walk out that door, we've made a decision, we're embracing that decision, and we're all going to have a consistent message on that decision. That's the failure in any change initiative. Because there's many influencing factors. I mean, we're in California. And we have a really, really, really strong labor representation. And the minute you try to do anything, you get a cease and desist. Oh, you're changing working conditions. Oh, you're doing this. So that's the reaction. It's the normal reaction. It's the anxiety. It's the, people's perception of what's happening. And it goes back to something that Brad mentioned earlier. It's all about the messaging. If you don't lead the message, they will make their own. Meaning the staff will make their own message, the physicians will make their own message, the union and labor will help them create a new message. It makes good stuff for flyers and stuff. I mean, that's what happens, and we deal with that. And so those are the things that we've experienced, and it's been due to the lack of commitment, lack of engagement, lack of focus. The minute you address those issues, things go in a totally different direction. And the change, again, it's never going to be easy, but the change will flow a little smoother if everyone's in alignment and you're moving in the same direction.
Right. We do one more toss-up, and audience, please start thinking of questions, because I'll turn it over to you to participate here in just a second. But this is another toss-up that I like to hear from all panelists, because it's why we're here and it's about the patient. And so, how have you engaged patients in the change efforts? And what lessons did you learn about working through patients and seeing things through their eyes?
I'm going to jump in there before they steal all of my great ideas. And then Sarah and Brent, I'm all like, well, I guess what they said. No, it's everything we do. We, all of us are in healthcare or support healthcare, or but at the end of the day, we're here to care for people. And they need to be at the center of everything we do. And that's not always the case. Physicians many times round on patients at 9 o'clock because that's when they get into the office. It's like, well, no. Can you round at 7:30 so the patient can go home at 11 and not 5 o'clock? I mean, there's all these different things that we do, and I'm picking up physicians. Hopefully there's no physicians in the room. And if there are, oh well, right? But it goes. There's plenty to go around for all of us, right? We all play a role in this whole process. But we often lose focus on our patients, and we're making accommodations, making adjustments, modifying our operations in a way that will either yield the best efficiency, or will cost less, or it's all about the expense control and profitability. I mean, it's at the end of the day, you know, after several years of college, you know, I just learned one very basic principle: you need more revenues than expenses. That's it, right? And if you don't, you're in trouble. But that's the reality. We oftentimes make decisions not really considering what impact does this have on the patient. And until you are a patient yourself, or until you've had an experience with someone you love and you have to deal with that, you really kind of lose, you know, focus on what's happening there. I mean, I can tell you that one of my own staff, one of our own colleagues, I'm gonna throw him out there on the bus. We all know Baljeet, and Baljeet is one of my awesome rock stars and one of my team members, and he recently had an accident and he broke his foot. You know, he was out of work for several weeks, probably 7-8 weeks, you know, because he had to, you know, he couldn't bear any weight, he couldn't do a lot of that stuff, and he finally made it back to the office with a scooter. And he came up to we were meeting, and I said, hey, I'll meet you at your office, you know, don't you worry about it. So I got to his office, and I started joking about his scooter, and I said, hey, we should race down the hallway and stuff like that. But then I said, you know, how's it been? He goes, you know what, man? Now I know what our orthopedic patients deal with when they're trying to get from the parking lot, through the lobby, to the elevator, down the hall, to the clinic. He goes, it's freaking terrible. And I was all like, really? I said, so what are you going to do about it? You're in charge of all this stuff. What are you going to do about it? But, you know, again, it gives a different perspective, right? And I know for a fact he's going to do something about that. He's going to try and see if we can improve that. But it's about really focusing on not only ourselves and our own experiences, but working with patients. You know, in a previous facility, which I'll end with that brief experience. In a previous facility, we actually had meetings where we would have different encounters with patients. If we received a comment from a patient, or if we received a comment from a family member, we would be very quick to engage with them and say, hey, would you mind coming back and meeting with your care team? And many of them were kind of like, oh my God, no, I don't want to do that. They were scared. But, you know, after a couple of times, people were like, absolutely, positive or negative. And we would then bring everyone that was involved with that person's care into a conference room, and we would have them share their experience from when they walked into the facility, the care they received at the units, until they went home. And it's amazing how receptive, and the staff, when they would walk away at first, you know, the staff was like, oh my God, are we going to get in trouble? What's going to happen here? You know, no, they very quickly came back and realized, you know, this is, oh my God, that's so sad. I'm so sorry. You know, we will focus on that. And the message started going across to all the other units, to everyone else, and they were like, you know, this patient came and told us that they were so disappointed by the way we approached this situation, or the way we, you know, we demonstrated such poor sense, you know, cultural sensitivity. I mean, there were so many things that would come up out of these meetings, and having them and a loved one present and share from their eyes. We always wonder, well, why are our Press Ganey scores where they're at? That doesn't make sense. Something must be wrong, you know? Listen to what the people are saying. Bring them in and engage them. We did that at a facility. It made significant changes. It really drove significant changes. And really changes that were being driven by the frontline staff. They wanted to make those changes because they were able to resonate with the feelings and the emotions and the issues that those patients shared. Highly recommend that. I'm trying to see if we can get that moving forward in our current organization. I'm not there yet, but I can assure you, I'm going to make it happen. It makes a big difference.
Okay. So we do have an Office of Patient Experience. We have a director over that function. I would say I'm thinking about the strategic plan that we're in the process of implementing, and I'm thinking we're actually not doing a really great job at really building in that perspective. So there's areas where we do it well. We do have parts of the organization, like at CAHL Medical Foundation, where there are patient experience advisors, and that's their job, and they're showing up wearing that perspective all the time. The thing that I would say that I think we have a unique experience in our roles, in that we have to eat our own dog food. We are all patients. We care for our family members, we care for our kids, and remembering, and we personally experience the system that we're part of, and we all know that it really has opportunities for improvement. And if we can bring our own experience, tell our own stories, as you mentioned your colleague did, bringing that to our work, it's not the answer. There's still, I think, really a valid need to ask, specifically bring a person in who's had an experience, or when you're testing out a change, and get their reaction. But bringing ourselves, you know, vulnerably to the work to say, look, we had this experience with this care center. There's someone in the room where I was having an experience with my stepdad, and it's like, oh my God, I'm having, like, is this where we should go? This person is not helpful. This person at the desk is like not helpful. Who's her boss? You know, whatever. I didn't do that. Okay, maybe a little bit. But being able to share our own stories, because we know firsthand every day of the opportunities that we have to improve, and I don't think we need to separate that from ourselves as professionals, because we're our own customers. So I think remembering that in how we do our work is really important.
I think the first thing I would say, you know, we focus a lot, and a lot of organizations have, you know, patient councils that we get feedback, and I think we have to also remember that, you know, while that information is very valid, we really need to focus on the families probably as much as the patients, because the patients don't remember a lot of what goes on when they're in their care. It's the family members who are dealing with our staff, and the families who are the ones that are negotiating all the different components of the doctor rounding and how do we get there on time and all of those things. And so we want to, you know, make sure we get in both sides of that level of feedback. I completely agree. You know, the feedback is hard. The feedback is tough sometimes, and you're like, no, we didn't do that, and then you realize, yes, we did. And I tell my group when I get pushback, it's, you know, the reality is perception is reality, and we have to just come to the conclusion that we failed in some aspect of communication or experience or something, and we have to do better the next time. I think that you know, I think we put councils together. We at UC Davis have started doing this. We've tried to get people to engage with us a little bit differently, bringing them in at, you know, evening hours, bringing them in at times when the families are typically rounding, and holding a special session at 9 o'clock in the morning. Whatever works for our families. And honestly, we've moved it into not after they left, but while they're still here. How do we engage those family members while they're still in the building? Because then you have opportunities to fix the problems before they leave, if you know that there's something that's been irritating them the whole way through the process. I think one of the other areas where we've been successful is where I think everybody in California has got a construction project, and is really trying to engage those families and patients during these construction projects, because that's when you have the ability and time to make systematic changes to an experience. I think on the adult side, we can learn a lot from the pediatric side in how to make an experience better for all patients and families. It doesn't matter how old you are. I think the children's hospital world is much better at adapting an environment that's more patient and family friendly, and I think the acute adult side needs to learn a lot more from that world. So I just think we have to acknowledge we have problems, we have to get that feedback, and we have to remember, I think that's what Louis said first, I mean, it's all about the patient, and so that's our job and our duty to make sure that the next patient has a better experience.
Right. Thank you. Let's turn it over to the audience, and just remember that we are live streaming to our friends in Fresno, so if you would project with your questions that you have.
And be gentle.
Not all at once, please.
Okay, I'll start. Hi, I'm Holly Houston with Sky's the Limit Communications, and I'm a healthcare communications consultant. So you all spoke about overuse of consultants, but at the same time you spoke about the importance of communications. So is there a role for the communications consultant to help you during times of change?
Absolutely. I think the sky's the limit, really. No, absolutely. I do. Although we, and to qualify, really, it's not. There's nothing wrong with leveraging consultants. I think the message that my colleagues and I are trying to communicate is the fact that we cannot have an over dependence on consultants. We need to own our business. We need to manage our business. Now we need to leverage our consultants to certain things that they can add value for, and there's very specific, and that's where I think defining and creating a very detailed scope of service or scope of work is what's important, to make sure that they're addressing those areas where we know we have deficiencies, where we know we have some vulnerabilities, and how we can then build on those. The reality is, for the most part, we're administrators, we're care providers, we do a lot of things great, but communication is not our forte, at least it's not my forte. I can write a pretty good memo, but there are certain specific tactics and there's different things that can be done and leveraged by a communication specialist, someone that has that skill set, someone that's got different experiences, that brings those experiences from other organizations that dealt with similar circumstances. I will tell you, for example, one of the things that I've done in the past in previous facilities during labor negotiations. During labor negotiations, I always brought in a consultant, because it was important for us to ensure that we were managing the message.
Right.
And someone that had that skill set, someone that had that focus, but equally that brought that additional bandwidth to help support that effort, because I was busy just dealing with other stuff. So there is a need. Communication is something that I will say we don't do very well. I don't think anyone, I haven't been in any hospital throughout my entire career that I can say, oh my God, their communication was rocking. We don't do that very well, and so there is a need for communication experts, and to me it just goes down to doing it, being very deliberate, very focused, and how you're managing that to address a particular need.
Thank you.
Yes, right here.
Thank you for your presentation. I'm Sherry Ambrose. I'm with Dignity Health in Sequoia Hospital. I liked what you said about developing leadership behaviors to sustain change there. Thank you. What you mentioned, I think, about curiosity, self-discipline, and humility was very important. Some of us are doing resiliency training in some of our health centers, or other types of leadership tools and or trainings. Is there anything in particular that any of you are doing to sort of support that? Humility, self-discipline, and curiosity?
Well, those are what I'm focused on. I actually was inspired by work that's happening at UCSF. Not UCSF, sorry, SF General. Zuckerberg, they're really looking at those leadership behaviors and creating spider graphs and having 360s for leaders. So we're not doing this. I would love to do this. I don't know, is anybody from there? Looking at the senior leadership team, getting 360 evaluation information to then develop those leaders to say, hey, look, on the humility side, we have some work to do, or in terms of willpower or perseverance, we have some work to do. So that's really based off of work that John Toussaint did in combination with the CEO of that organization. So that's something that those behaviors, many of us have organizations where we have values or leadership standards that are typically, in my view, not very uncomfortable. There are things like innovate, deliver, serve. It's like, yep, that's good, I do that. But if the behavior is in terms of be humble, humility or, willpower, it's slightly uncomfortable because it's personal. And I do think we're in a very personal profession. Getting to the point where we're articulating the expectations of leaders in those areas that are really how you should behave, how you conduct yourself. Innovation is not how you conduct yourself. I think that would be really cool. I'm pitching it. It's not. I think that's where we need to go.
No, I think equally it's investing in. I mean, we take it for granted. I think in many organizations we take for granted that our managers and leaders are fully equipped to deal with every single scenario and every single thing that they have going on. And there are times when you have leaders that are placed in those positions. Oftentimes, there's unfortunately, but the reality, they're oftentimes placed in positions just by default. You know what? So and so left, and you got it. You're the new manager, and other times, there's these you have these scenarios where you have leaders that they were phenomenal caregivers. They were the best caregiver in the world. They were on the unit. Every single patient loved them. The next available management position that came open, you got to put that person there, and they do, and then they struggle. And it's the tools to succeed. So I know that one of the things we're doing, and we actually made it one of our key strategies as an organization, and it's one of those strategies that we communicate to our board of trustees on how we're performing, and that was investing in our entire leadership team, where they're going through a six week what we call leadership academy. And in this leadership academy, they're learning about all these different behaviors, not only about some of the expectations, some of the work that we want to see from them and how they're going to move things along within the organization, but also leveraging how to leverage and how to utilize some of the tools that they're responsible for effectively managing their operation. And so, huge investment. I mean, we've got several hundred leaders within our organization. Tomorrow, Thursday, we're currently on our cohort number 6. There's 25 people that go per cohort. Cohort number 6, our CEO is in that class. One of those things where every single leader has to go through this. It doesn't matter what, if you're a manager and above, you're going through this course. We're wanting to make it successful. Again, when you add up 25 people in that room, times an average salary, huge investment from an organization. But we feel that it's going to pay dividends as we continue to move forward and provide great care.
I'll just add a couple of things. I think we're doing two different things, a little bit of credit. But Toby's our CNO, and we're moving away from those types of run-of-the-mill things that we put in job descriptions that are just, everyone still questions what they are, and we're putting in empathy and humility and some truly behavioral types of our management team and our nursing departments, that they something that has not been 100%. There's some of these things where we're still working these things out, but I think it's the way we need to, that we've been doing for a number of years, is we seek out twice a year and ask for nomination. I'm willing to go the extra mile because I want to be promoted up in the organization. And then what we do is we go into these types of, this is what it's going to take. We just assume everyone's a competent, maybe the best nurse on the floor, or prove that they're that level, and then they want to do a little bit of extra. And one of the assignments to grill me on when they for that and say, somebody made this decision, and I don't think it aligns with humility, change. But then we're engaging a whole thing different, not the way we're always doing it. There are certain things that people don't have all the complete picture to, but at the end of the day, I think it's making the organization better. So.
Working.
Yeah. So this one comes from Dr. Schultz. How might you socialize empathy and cultural awareness between staff, patients?
I think that has everyone seen the? I think you can just Google it and you can find it on YouTube. It's on YouTube. I think if you've seen that video, you know where I'm going with this. I mean, it's basically a video about walking in other people's shoes. and you see people walking. It looks like a very, I mean, this is, and so we have been trying to take these concepts. You know they're sick. You know they've got something that's happened to them, but you don't know what they're living through. You don't know where what their home life is like. You don't know what's going on with them. You don't know when that family member's with them. Do they know what they're getting into when they're going to be a caregiver now? When you know, 2 weeks ago they were doing just a regular job, and I think that's where we've got to go, is break it down and to think about again the patients. They're not a number. They're a human being that just happens to have something going wrong with them. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to break it down into simple forms to remind folks that this is a human that has a story. And that story sometimes gets told and sometimes it doesn't. But
the video, empathy, there's actually two.
Yeah.
Empathy 1 and empathy 2, or something like that. But they're both so impactful. The first one is really focusing on just patients and individuals, but even others within the video that just kind of gives you the sense of what they're dealing with, what's going through their minds. And the second one is actual patients or facility. And then at the end they tell you that this is the chair of surgery, this is the registration supervisor. These are actual employees. And that goes to my point, I think, beyond our patients and understanding and recognizing what they may be going through. It's about really having empathy and really thinking about one another. Caring for one another. It's about this care for the caregiver. To work, and I don't know what's going on in their lives. I don't know what did they just deal with that awareness. If we don't really spend time and focus to give them that additional support, how do we expect them to provide exceptional care? So that we cannot lose focus on that. It's not just about the patient and really focusing on ensuring we're meeting all their needs and ultimately, hopefully, having their perception of their care is a favorable one, and you have great scores reflected as a result. It's not about that. It's about really providing high quality care. It's about doing the right things, making sure that they understand what they're dealing with, what they're going through, and that will hopefully and ultimately be reflected in those Press Ganey scores. But equally, it's the investment and the focus and what we want to make sure we do with our staff, with our caregivers. Really being supportive, understanding, and being aware. So if you're seeing someone acting out, the first thing shouldn't be, you know what, you got to write them up. Done. No, the first thing should be is something wrong? How can we help you? What's happening? Is there something we can do to change? It's a different mindset, and we got to work through that. So it's, I think, looking at both, focusing on both.
Yeah, I'll just make a comment that's more personal for what I'm trying to do with my team, and there's several of my team members here, so if you guys have an opinion different or anyway, little things, but one of the things that I try to do at the start of every meeting is just to have a mindful minute. I know it's a very kind of Berkeley concept, but just give yourself a second to show up. Because you raced through the parking lot and you got here at 2:59, or you just dropped your kid off for the first day of first grade and it was super intense, or your father-in-law is in the hospital. All of us have these lives. And if we just transition in and sit down there and go through the agenda, I don't think we're not giving ourselves a landing pad to actually do the kind of job we want to do. So just simple thing at the start of the minute before you even get going is just give yourself some quiet, literally like a minute, to arrive. Congratulate yourself. Be honest with yourself. So we do that. The experiment we've tried is in our engagement system, we've established a people huddle. And one of the goals that I had for this huddle was we talk about capacity. One of the main parts of the team, and a lot of what we do is we consult. We're the strategic project management team for the system, and that's a hard job. And in doing that job, we gauge capacity because we have to figure out who can work on what. So we have ways of doing that, but what we all know is that you may have a full 40 hours that week to work on something, but because the people you're working with are super hard to work with, it takes 60. Or because you are struggling with your child not adjusting to first grade, or your father-in-law, or whatever, you've got about 35. Maybe you have 30. So what I was hoping to do with this huddle is have the factual, you know, how's your capacity, kind of more objective, but also a way to gauge, like, are you like, yeah, or are you like, I'm good, I could do more. Do you need some help? Or I need to give you something because and it's not working the way I thought it would work. Because people aren't feeling that safe to actually, you know, this is me. What you see is what you get. I'm very like, oh my God, my day sucked. I arrived at that time. And downers like that, and people don't feel safe saying they've got capacity. You know, the directors don't feel safe saying, hair on fire. So anyway, I think there's ways we can, like you said, just try, how do we build safe ways to be real with each other about what we can be relied upon, how we're doing, how we can deliver our best work. It's very complicated, but we're experimenting, right?
Great question. Yes.
My name is David Betancourt. I'm a manager of risk systems configuration with John Muir Health. My question is, with so much change happening within organizations, how do you ensure as an executive team that staff don't get change overload, and how do you support managers in being able to make sure that that they don't struggle with getting other departments to support the things that they're getting asked to do?
Operations.
Yeah, you want to start?
Go ahead.
You know, I think that's a little tough, and we said operations, because I think that's what we do every day. I mean, I think we have to manage the amount of change. That's a leader's job, is to say, okay, I can tell the organization's really getting stressed here. At the same time, the other side of my head is thinking, but if we don't get these 3 or 4 things done, we're going to be behind. So it's a balance. It's a constant balance I think every leader is trying to go through. And I think that it gets back to communicating the change and why we have to do this. At the same time, you know, you've got to lead by example too. I mean, you can't say, oh, you guys need to go change, and I know you're really stressed out, but you'll get it. I mean, you have to be there with them, and because you're pushing organizations, and a lot of these change efforts that we're talking about here, you know, they do stress out the entire organization. You may not think. I recently had a big change in a department, our environmental service department, and you would think, okay, how would that affect the finance department? Well, it affects the finance department, it affects the, you know, clinical engineering department, it affects the whole organization. And so I think we have to learn to manage it. My fear with it is, though, sometimes we use that as an excuse to not change. And I think that's why a leader has to know when to push, when not to push. But no, sometimes people are always going to push back. Oh, I can't. And a lot of times that's because they're scared. And so I think that's just part of us, part of the operations world, and those of us that sit in operations, I think it's something we think about every day.
Yeah, I would add to that. I would say that, as I mentioned earlier, it goes back to really that how well that executive team is functioning together. Is there that alignment at the executive team? I will tell you that as an organization, we 2 years ago we embarked on we had a consultant that helped us develop our strategic plan. And we set a new 5-year strategy, and so we had several operational tactics and things that we were focusing on to help us, start transforming the system. Recognizing we had all these major initiatives and major projects that were in our very near future, and so this alignment and with the executive team, making sure that we ourselves were on the same page, that we understood what was happening, and then we brought in several members of our leadership team, most of all areas being represented. And we actually went through an exercise that was, it was start, stop, continue type of exercise, right? And so we had these what do you call these things, those easels with those poster boards and stuff, where people, every group was tasked with what do we need to start, what do we need to stop, and what will we continue. And so they were we went through that exercise, we compiled all that information, and we went back, we looked at where we were at as an organization, what we had already committed to, how much progress we had made, how things were moving forward, recognizing the bandwidth of the teams, recognizing when we were moving forward with this tremendous project of the EHR implementation. And we, at the end of the day, after our strategic session, we decided to say, you know what, we're just going to stay the course. We're not going to do anything new. We're going to continue to do what we had planned last year. We're going to continue with those efforts. We're going to make sure that we get really good at it in some of those areas, and that we hardwire, we sustain it before we try and take anything else on, because this is where we want to be, and we want to make sure that we don't detract from that major initiative that could essentially collapse the organization if we don't do it well. So that's the key. It's again, it comes back to the executive alignment, making sure that we engage our staff, that we get a sense, and that we give you an opportunity. I mean, because I feel I have a really good grasp of what my entire team is dealing with, but I don't know everything they're dealing with. So getting that understanding, giving them that opportunity, having that open and candid discussion, and being able to say, all right, you know what, that's fair. Let's take that off. This is more important. Because this notion of just keep piling on, at some point, it's going to collapse under its own weight. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. So that's, I think, the key there in the strategy, to make sure that you're engaging the staff on that.
I'll just add that we did the same exercise, and we've all stopped doing, and we stopped other people's things. I think for us, what we're really trying to build is a systematic way to deploy strategy. So simplify the complex at the top, be clear about what drives the performance you want, and then have a negotiation with operations or even functional departments. Can you do this? We're going to do this, that, and this year. This year, legal department, can you handle it? IT, can you handle it? Hospitals, can you handle it? And then it's not a dictate. It's a conversation. It's a negotiation. That's part of it. And the other thing I would say is change management is a discipline. People are expert at it. And everybody thinks they're good at it, but we're not good at it. Generally, we're not good at it. And recognizing that building expertise, having people and consultants who are good at it, finding a way to measure it and really support it, I think is another really wonderful way to support it in the organization. The other thing I wrote is just a sense of humor. I mean, we have to have some levity, some joy, laugh about it. Goes a long way.
Well, we only have a few more minutes left, so I want to do one last question for each panelist, and to kind of sum up everything for today is, what is the most important thing someone in your position can do to advance successful change?
Listen. Do less talking and more listening. Working and collaborating with the staff, understanding their issues, understanding their challenges, rounding with them, visualizing, getting a better sense of what's happening. I achieve my goal every single day. I get 10,000 steps every single day and beyond. I cannot effectively manage from behind a desk, and so I'm always out and about, checking in, meeting with the staff, understanding. And so in order to really establish that credibility from the staff, from the team, that's so important. I mean, there's staff that may like me, some that may not, and that's okay. But the reality is that for the most part, they respect me. And they respect me because I'm there. I'm not afraid to take on some of the challenges. I'm not afraid to deal with some of the, the heavy issues. I'm always visible and present, and I try to listen as much as I can.
Totally agree. Listening. I think trying to figure out, even on my bad days, how do I inspire? I think that's really leaders lead. So that's a key. The other thing is hire really awesome people, and then be authentic with them and trust them. When they give you advice and they're brave enough to come and tell you, you gotta get out there, or that didn't go over well, or they think there's something you're not saying. What a gift. It's a great gift.
I think along the same lines, I think, I said this earlier, but you as the leader, you have to be the face. You have to stand out in front. You have to take the praises and the jabs, and that you have to lead by example, and truly show whoever you're leading that you're there with them. I think that I said this earlier as well, but you've got to manage that rumor mill that can really get you quickly. I like to tell my staff, because I try to have open dialogues. I don't want them to be. I don't want to be that person they see as that guy walking in this suit. That doesn't understand them. But at the same time, they have to understand that comes with a little bit of if you ask me a question, I'm going to give you the information. You may not like that information. You may not like what I'm going to tell you about the change, but I will say at 4:25, this is the information I have, and you have to be honest about it. Now, it may change at 4:30, but they have to know that it may change, because that's how it does change. That's our world. Our healthcare environment changes so quickly for us. But I just think as leaders, those are the things that we just have to be authentic and to really be in the trenches with them too.
We've got a few more announcements after this, but please join me in a round of applause. Thank you. Just a couple housekeeping things before I turn it over. Make sure we have surveys at every chair. There are actually 2 surveys. If you are registering for CEUs, for clinical staff, make sure you've signed in, and make sure you definitely turn in that survey, otherwise we can't submit your CEUs, and we have those certificates for you. For those that are not doing CEUs, just a general ACHE survey, we want to change, we want to improve, and so please let us know what we did well and what opportunities we can do to improve. The other thing I will also stand up here and say, because I have the podium, so I'm going to take the opportunity to do that, is bring a friend next time. Tell people about this. This is how we get better in our profession. We get out of our 4 walls of our own institution, we share knowledge. I took copious notes today. I learned so much, and so thank you very much to our panelists. And again, that's my challenge to you, is let's keep growing as a professional organization and keep getting better. So with that, I will leave you with this, a couple quotes about change, and then I'll turn it over to my colleagues with CAHL. And this is, it is not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent one that survives. It is the one that is most adaptable to change, by Charles Darwin. And then one that we often lose sight of, this is a quote by Maya Angelou. We delight in the beauty of the butterfly, but rarely admit the changes it has gone through to achieve that beauty. So thank you. I'll turn it over.
Well, I think the panel deserves a louder applause there. Yes, we thank you for the knowledge you've shared and for giving us this opportunity and answering our call to be on this panel. One thing that I picked out, I did a summary of everything that everybody spoke, is don't get comfortable even if you feel comfortable. We heard that change is inevitable, and a lot of things are changing on a daily basis. And another change that's actually creeping in that a few people have caught up with, and some people still catching up on, is the role of technology. I was at a Cisco Live event, 2015, and the then CEO, John Chambers, he said it this way. He said, every organization is an IT company that specializes in something else. So for us, we're a hospital, but we're an IT company that specializes in caring for the well-being of the community that we serve. So with that said, when I came into Alameda Hospital, you know, literally what I would be handed over is, oh, David, here's the software, go install it, go implement it, to what we have now. And I mean, it feels inundating sometimes, but I don't mind. Everybody now comes because I let everybody know the minute that you think about any initiative, also be thinking about IT because it has an IT component in it. So get that IT principal in that meeting to help with your deliberation. So without much further ado, I also want to say thank you. And let me say this, I mixed this up and I'm going to have to open it. The only one that I know that's different is for Mr. Luis Fonseca. His is different. It's not, everything is the same value, but is received. I had to say that he's received this in the past. And actually, I want to say this. Back in 2017, when we were trying to put events together, we were running behind. And I had a meeting with him, and he says, David, it's okay to use my name. And I'll tell you, his name is like a golden scepter. It opens doors. So I want to thank everyone. So let me open this to see which is whose this is. Okay. Yeah, and this is just a token to say to appreciate your time with us and the knowledge you've shared with us. So final house cleaning is the evaluation forms are very crucial. Also crucial, if you're an ACHE member, is the attendance register. Because the only way we get credit for face-to-face events is when ACHE sees that signature on that attendance register. I've, sometimes even though I'm one of the people that organize this together, and sorry I did not introduce myself. My name is David Akinsanya. I'm one of the co-chairs for the LPC, and I want to appreciate the team, Lillian, Corey, we have Damon, we have all of the people, and Sherry, all the people in the house that help put all of this together. I'm very grateful for all of that work. So yes, please fill out the survey, sign the attendance register. If you are not familiar with the Career Edge, avail yourself with information over there. We also have events coming up. We put flyers out there, the ones that are already published on the website. You can see them. One that's coming up very soon on the 6th of September is with Luis Fonseca. I'm telling you, if you get close up, you'll get even more information than you're getting right now. So we want that room to be filled beyond capacity. So the annual meeting is at 5:30. So we still have things in here that to keep us fresh. And if you want to use the bathroom before the meeting, please free to do so. And with that, I say thank you everyone for coming. And we do hope to see you more in all of our events. Thank you.
Refreshments, if you would, we have complimentary wine and beer in the bar that's just across the way. There'll be more food on that side as well. So this is a time to network. Say hello to all your friends and colleagues from your